In Grid Studio, it is now possible to design your own custom widgets. Let's dive in and take a look at how you can do that. First, you would need to create a widget. Within the widget, you can see under the inspector, you can move this widget around, and of course, size, you can manually adjust this. And of course, you can always come into here and enter your own value. So let's say we want to create a widget of size 180 by 180 pixels. So this is a square widget that I'll be using. I can go in here and open the editor, and this is where I can start creating and designing how my widget looks. First off, a widget, it's by default, it's just a transparent object. It's got no background, so you can design your own background. Let's do something simple where we're creating a rectangle as the base and define some color for it. As with any other things in the system, you can come in here under layouts. You can now see as I'm moving this object around the rectangle, the values of where they are and also the size will also change. And just like anything else, you can always come in here and enter those values in. So what I want to do is, maybe before I do that, let's define what this rectangle even looks like. So I would like to have a border color. Let's make that black. Let's add some border to that. And then my fill color, I'm happy with that. It's just a gray. And I want to maybe even round off the corners as well. So let's do something like that. Cool. Next, I'm going to place it where I want. In my situation, I kind of want to be right in the middle and basically fill out the entire size of the widget. So under the inspector, you can see that there's the option to constrain the width and the height. By adding a constraint to the width and the height, you would now see the option for the width and height are grayed out. And now basically you're defining based on margins from the left, right, top, and bottom edge. You also have the option to define whether this is based on a pixel count or a percentage. So if it's a percentage, it would actually scale accordingly to this overall size of your entire widget. So that's this overall size here. If not, if you're defining by pixels, then they will be a fixed width. It does not matter how big that widget becomes. What I want to do is let's define them all to be a percentage, and I want them to be just a tiny little bit amount, a 2% margin around the edges. Oh, so now I have my overall background. The next thing that I want to do is to create a push button interface, something that I can actually push on and actually trigger it. So you can right click onto the empty space here, and you can then choose the push button. Alternatively, you can always just come in here and get the same list, or at the same time, you can always just search for it as well. Great. So now I have a push button. I can again move this around. So I'm moving this push button around, and again, I am going to first define where I want my button to be. Again, I'm going to be using the constraints to help me just center it. And I'm going to apply just so that it is a little bit smaller than the other rectangle. So this is how it looks like. That's the overall size. And let me define what the color is. So this color field is going to be basically the default state of what it looks like. So I want it to be like a dark red. By the looks of it, I want to maybe increase this corner radius as well. Something like that. Now that I have this value, I can actually come over here and then also start defining what the color looks like when the mouse is hovering over the button. So let's make that a little lighter. And then similarly, then when you are clicking down on the button, I want it to be this nice and bright red color. So that's basically what this button would look like. Um, the next thing is I can then also define create a little label, add some text over on top. And in this instance, I'm gonna just write some text in here just so that we can see what that looks like. So I've got the words push under the label. I can choose some font, the font style, and let's increase that font size. Uh, let's say to be 20. I can also align it within the actual bounding box. And in under this instance, I'm going to constrain my width so that it will just be the width of the overall widget. And then on the height, I would want it to be actually a percentage. So I'm going to be 20% of the overall widget, but I'm going to place it at 40%. That should actually put it nicely right in the middle of that. And also maybe even apply a bit of a margin just to make sure that this actually sits right in the middle of that. So even if the text gets a little longer, it will always just stay within that this little red marker, the bounding box. Cool. So this is basically how what my button looks like. So we can close the editor, and if we switch into the play mode of the board, you can then see how this widget looks like as I'm interacting with it. After defining all of this, we can always just come back in here and start actually changing and editing some of these things. Another thing to discuss about is that there is a rendering layer order. So as things are added into the list of under the widget, the items that are lower on the list are rendered later. So they basically then sit on top of the object that is higher in the tree. So let's say if I swap these order, or I can actually place them inside. If I swap these order, you can now see that the button is actually on top or rendered last. So we render the the rectangle, then we render the label, and then we then render the button itself. So you can move these orders around by just dragging them around. Um, and you can also place them underneath of each other as a parent and child. And now see that it will be relative to the parent object. So you can then move things as a group, basically. Another thing that we want to do is also look at a very special parameter under inspector called interactable. Why we would want to look into this is because, for example, the label, it's just a label, but in fact, you don't actually really want to interact with it. Predominantly, you would want to interact with the overall button underneath. So this overall area, the rectangle where the label is, you actually want to disable the interactable just so that when people are clicking right in the middle of where the text is, it would actually trigger the object underneath, which is the button, the little push button here. And it would then actually be able to do the triggering of this uh, button interface as well. And what you want to do, just to be safe, we can also disable the interactable for the rectangle, which is the background, which is, yes, in most people, when they're looking at this, they might only view the red part is the actual button itself of this giant red button and not the outside bounding box. So this is a very important parameter to look into, and as you're designing and you're stacking multiple objects on top of each other, be mindful of exactly which item it is that you actually want to allow the user to interact with, and then also specifically disabling the ones that are on top just so that they don't block the interaction to the actual item that you want the user to interact with. So there you go. That's how you would then design your first customized widget.